Making thumbnails has been a crucial part of my YouTube journey, and I've sort of loved making minimal thumbnails. And if you followed me for any amount of time, you would have seen some of the worst kind of minimal thumbnails, but also some of the best kind of minimal thumbnails, because I feel like if you do the worst you can only get better from there, and I've sort of gone through that entire process with me doing YouTube. However, I've seen one thumbnail that sort of caught my eye in the last few weeks. It's Marques' thumbnail of iPadOS 15. So he's made a video of the review of iPadOS 15, and I thought the thumbnail, likewise many of the other people in the comment section of his post thought the thumbnail looked absolutely incredible. But my question was, are you able to replicate it? So I sort of took it as a challenge for myself to see if I can get close to what Marques has done with his thumbnail with the gear that I have. So I've got the Panasonic G7, which I'm recording on. I've also got two softboxes, which you can probably see one of at the back of this video, as well as a Godox SL70 light, which is probably the most powerful light that I own. So having given myself this challenge, I wasn't going in blind. I had a fair idea of how Marques might have done his thumbnail, and I don't know any of his behind the scenes or what sort of setup he used for the thumbnail, but I did take a lot of pictures in trying to finalize the final picture that I was going to use as the basis for the thumbnail, which is the one you see on screen. To manipulate this, first of all, I got rid of the background by tracing around the Huawei MatePad Pro 12.6 tablet. That's the only tablet I had. I didn't have the iPad, so I just went with that. And the overall process was pretty easy. Likewise, I did the same thing for the display. Just to give it a bit more pop, I think the regular display didn't look as good as it could be. But before I replaced the display, I also laid the foundation of the background of the thumbnail, which is this blue teal sort of color borrowed from Marques' thumbnail, because I wanted the final product that I was making to look as close to Marques' as possible. I then took a screenshot of my tablet's home screen, took that picture and pasted it and sort of filled up the gap that I left when I removed the original screen, and I sort of also adjusted the brightness and colors a bit so you get a slight hint of vibrancy, and that's the foundation for the thumbnail. Next up, for the shadow, I think this sort of adds the realism back into the picture. I took a copy of the frame of the tablet that I'd made, erased the extra stuff that I didn't need, and laid it below the tablet almost to make up how the shadow would look for the tablet. You can actually check out how I do this with all of my thumbnails from the separate video that I've made where I go in depth into the process of how to add shadows. If you're interested, make sure you click the card above. But so far, so good. I think it's looking pretty good with the shadow, but then remain all of the other elements on the thumbnail. We've got 5 different elements to add with this thumbnail to complete it, and I think the best way to go about it is to move in a clockwise direction, going over each one by one. So for the text, all I did was look for some fancy cursive writing font, made it white, and added a bit of a Gaussian blur to get that depth effect. It was pretty simple, there was nothing too crazy involved, and overall, pretty happy with it. The next element though, that was difficult. First of all, finding a stock image that's usable without a watermark of a textbook is a challenge in itself, let alone manipulating that picture to make it look natural and not awkwardly placed or weird in the background of the thumbnail. But once I managed to do that after multiple attempts, believe it or not, I also had to make sure that there's a dual tone finish to the book, and I literally just added 2 layers with different color settings to bring about a similar effect. I'd say this is not perfect, although it does the job, and I'm quite happy with that dissolve kind of effect on the outline of the book. Anyways, next up, we're just adding text, which I think is very self-explanatory and not that difficult. I don't think there's much to discuss here. I just went for a tried and proven font, adjusted it slightly and made it 2.0 aptly for that Harmony OS 2.0 software that the tablet I'm using is running. I also noticed that there's a slight gradient to the text, so I added that in, and I also added this small pop effect, which on the overall turned out pretty nice looking. Next up is the pen or pencil, and thankfully I had the foresight to take a picture of this prior. This was probably, again, one of the simpler elements to add to the thumbnail because everything, including the angle of the pencil, was set up. The only thing I needed to do was to take the pencil out of the original image, put it into the finished thumbnail and adjust the colors slightly, and also add a bit of a shadow for a realistic look. But the most challenging element was adding the AirPods Max. I haven't got any lying around, so taking a picture in that orientation was the first difficulty, although after a bit of a search I found this image from iMore and took out nearly all of the background, but even after doing that it was nowhere near the same effect as the rest of the image and the thumbnail, and that's when I learned about this thing called filter gallery on Photoshop. Now I know there must be many ways to do this better, but playing around with this worked the best for me at the time. I also realized that I needed more of an outline rather than a full image, so I worked across the entire image manually, sort of removing things and bits and pieces here and there, and to be honest, the finished result wasn't something I was too disappointed by. And of course, with that, the final thumbnail was ready. So here's a reference. This is Marques's thumbnail, which is on screen at the moment, and here's mine that's inspired by Marques's thumbnail. I just wanted to document the entire process because one, it allows me to keep track of where I am at a certain point, and number two, this also allows me to learn more about how to manipulate thumbnails at the end of the day. I learned something new with this process, and I think that's a win-win for me. I hope one day Marques comes across this video and finds it cool, but until then, thank you guys for watching. Do subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one, more videos on tech in general, as well as vlogs here in Dubai. So make sure you're subscribed, like the video if you enjoyed it, and once again, thank you guys for watching. This was Vaibhav, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.